Day 1. I have been instructed quite insistently to begin this formal log of our diplomatic mission. Personally, I see little point in documenting each detail of what already appears to be a wildly unpredictable affair. Still, I obey. The humans, this peculiar, contradictory species, have chosen today to finally meet us in person after an exhausting gauntlet of protocols, security checks, and a communications delay that bordered on paranoid obstruction. To say their approach was cautious would be too kind. Hysterical, perhaps, or deeply suspicious. They took nearly a dozen of their planetary rotations just to respond to our message of peaceful intent and action that, based on what I've since learned, almost triggered an internal conflict among their own governments. Apparently, the very possibility that our message might be a ploy, a ruse, or a prelude to invasion was enough to nearly fracture their fragile unity. That was our greeting. It makes me wonder, have they encountered other alien races before? Or is this degree of suspicion innate to their evolutionary path? My instinct says it's the latter. They seem to exist in a state of permanent vigilance, ready to see threats where none exist. Fear, it seems, is the forge in which their society was hammered into shape. Despite only ruling a single star system, their military forces are alarmingly well-funded and expansive, enough to rival small interstellar coalitions. It's excessive, but perhaps understandable for a people who, by their own admission, have been at war with each other for most of their known history. Day 2. Our second encounter has only deepened the mystery of these humans. We expected a military figure, a commander, or perhaps one of their famed generals. Instead, they sent a soft-spoken civilian named Calder Anson, a diplomat. He greeted us with a firm but measured tone, betraying none of the fear or fanfare I had anticipated. Curious, I asked discreetly about the choice. I had assumed that a species so enamored with martial strength would lead with one of their warriors, but it turns out Calder was selected through a closed voting process, an internal affair among their highest national leaders. Not a general election. No voices from the common citizen, just a circle of elites casting their decision in private. This system troubles me more than I care to admit. In a galaxy where transparency and mutual trust are prized, such opaque mechanisms seem bound to sow delay, or worse, deceit. Day 3. Today brought with it a flood of human delegates, more than I expected, each dragging what appeared to be dozens of portable computing devices. Our universal translators, always hungry for new input, made short work of their singular language, allowing us to browse their data without issue. The data. It was a torrent, gigabytes upon gigabytes of human knowledge, cultural texts, historical archives, audio files, visual records, maps, timelines, linguistics, and even rudimentary star charts. What startled me wasn't the content, it was the gesture. Such openness, such vulnerable transparency. Why give us this? Why offer so much, so early? I was reminded, with a cold stab of realization, that they had nearly torn themselves apart at the mere receipt of our message. Could this generosity be compensation? A cultural overcorrection? Or do they believe that drowning us in information will protect them somehow? I don't know, but it unsettles me. Several weeks later, I apologize for the gap in entries, but I've been drowning in human data. Every spare hour has been spent dissecting their social patterns, military records, psychological profiles, and most disturbingly, their violent history. There is no equivalent among our people. None, since the moment they discovered fire. These beings have burned themselves with it, metaphorically and literally. They have fought wars over invisible gods, lines on maps, skin tones, and imagined insults. Nearly 20% of their most advanced technologies, including their relativistic propulsion systems, can trace their origin directly to weapons programs. Death, it seems, is their muse. We've studied predatory species before, but never one so self-directed in its destruction. The staggering tally of their own dead, millions upon millions, far outstrips the total casualties suffered by my own species across our entire evolutionary record. They kill themselves with a frequency and creativity that is both horrifying and morbidly fascinating. I believe now that their openness is not trusted as exhaustion. These are not innocents. They are survivors of themselves. Week 9. The 9th week of our summit has drawn to a close, and the novelty of our presence has finally begun to fade across human society. In the beginning, every news outlet, blog feed, and visual broadcast was saturated with our image. Their reactions spanned the emotional spectrum: ecstatic joy, collective panic, religious fervor, apocalyptic dread. Now, they are returning to their routines. Political scandals, sports, and celebrity gossip have reclaimed the headlines. I struggle to interpret this. Is it resilience? A strength of spirit that adapts quickly to paradigm shifts? Or is it something more cynical? Have they grown so numb from internal crises that even proof of alien life has a short shelf life? The human ambassador, Calder, remains cordial but unreadable. Yet I can sense it, the worry building among our delegation. We do not understand these people, and what we do understand concerns us deeply. I was not prepared for today. The human ambassador, Calder, asked to meet me personally, not in some formal chamber with ranks of delegates or military guards, but alone, casually, aboard our vessel. His request was gentle, almost considerate. He claimed he had sensed that I was growing anxious about our progress, or perhaps our lack of it. I asked him how he could possibly know that. He had only met our species for the first time a few dozen of their solar cycles ago. Our emotions are difficult even for our own kind to interpret. His answer? It's part of the job. He smiled as he said it, a tired but genuine expression. I pressed further, curious about the human response or seeming lack thereof to our presence. Most of their media had turned away from us. No marches in the streets, no global movements, no signs of unrest or celebration. It felt quiet, too quiet. Calder explained, in his calm voice, that many humans had simply chosen to wait, to observe, to see what would happen. They had learned, through centuries of bitter trial, that early reactions often led to chaos. So now, they hesitate until they have more to fear, or more to gain. He paused, then added something that stayed with me long after our meeting. Even if your kind joins the galactic community, most of our people will stay right here. They'll keep farming, falling in love, complaining about taxes, chasing dreams, and dying old. That's just who we are. I was stunned. I asked how that could be, when so many humans had already established colonies throughout their system. Wouldn't they leap at the chance to explore the stars? He laughed. It's different, he said, when you can still see Earth through your window. That moment struck me as more profound than I could explain. A species driven by curiosity, ambition, and conflict, yet tethered to their birthplace by invisible threads of nostalgia and identity. Fascinating. Later that week, the pace of our talks increased significantly. Our language matrix, originally only calibrated for basic phrases and vocabulary, had finally integrated enough linguistic nuance to pick up inflection, sarcasm, and the ever-elusive intent behind human words. Suddenly, Calder's speech made more sense. Not just what he said, but how he said it. He confessed to us that he'd been deliberately avoiding their idioms, slang, and colloquialisms during our early meetings. Didn't want to say something like kick the bucket and make you think we were about to start a war, he quipped. I appreciated the restraint, but now that our translators were up to the task, Calder began speaking more naturally, fluidly, even colorfully. Conversations became faster, more animated, but also more challenging. Human speech is a maze of metaphors and emotional overtones. I worried this rapid dialogue might derail the delicate balance of diplomacy we'd fought so hard to establish. And then it happened. The turning point. He brought up faster than light travel. Normally, we do not discuss TTL with a species that hasn't already developed it. It's a galactic rule, not a law, but a tradition steeped in caution. Species should reach that threshold on their own. If they aren't ready, giving them such power invites disaster. But the humans were different. Unsettlingly so. They had mapped, colonized, and even industrialized large portions of their own star system without the benefit of TTL. 7 inhabited worlds, over 1,000 mapped or mined bodies, entire populations living in vast orbiting megastructures, factories, farms, habitats, refineries. They move resources across interplanetary distances with breathtaking efficiency. All of this without breaking the light barrier. Most of their species doesn't even live on their homeworld anymore. I began to wonder, if they can accomplish this much with such limited technology, what would they do with access to the stars? One of their diplomats has started copying our body language too. At first, I didn't notice subtle gestures, posture, spacing. But now I see it, I feel it, and worse, it works. I find myself relaxing in his presence without meaning to. He is mimicking us to build trust. A cultural technique? A psychological trick? I fear it's both. And if they can do that, what else? Can they replicate? The answer came during the next session. Calder, with his usual grace, made a request. He asked delicately, but directly, that we provide a fully functional FTTL drive for human study. Just one, for analysis, perhaps reverse engineering. In exchange, they would offer an equally valuable piece of human technology. Though he left the details vague, our ambassador refused, immediately and firmly. He praised their intellect, even their diplomacy. But he made it clear, FTTL is not a gift. It is a threshold, one they must reach on their own. The consequences of giving it away, even to a species as advanced and adaptable as the humans, are too unpredictable. Calder's face, for once, betrayed genuine shock. Then, suspicion. He realized somehow that we had anticipated this request and discussed it among ourselves. How he knew, I cannot guess, but the knowledge made him visibly tense. Still, he accepted the decision, at least outwardly. But I don't think this matter is settled. Not by a long shot. Today marks exactly 1/2 of a human year since we made first contact. We were invited politely but firmly to observe the latest addition to their orbital infrastructure. I anticipated a modest outpost or perhaps a prototype station. What we witnessed instead was inspiring. High above the curvature of Earth, within the void between planets, hung the skeletal structure of a new orbital habitat. It wasn't just a ship or a station, it was a city, suspended in vacuum, alive with movement. Great modular arms, each hundreds of meters long, were already being fitted into place by enormous autonomous machines, construction drones, massive robotic constructs. The size of our cruisers were melting down asteroids in orbit. Raw ore was refined in microgravity furnaces powered by what they call relativistic drive haulers. These hulking vessels return from the asteroid belts with huge chunks of celestial rock, guided by pre-programmed trajectories and intelligent navigation systems. Once processed, the slag was separated into its elemental components: hydrogen for fuel, oxygen for life, nitrogen for agriculture, and silicon for their computer cores. Everything else, metals, composites, synthetics, was converted directly into habitat modules. It is, by far, the most efficient orbital construction operation I have ever seen. And all of it was born not from luxury or access to abundance, but from limitation. The humans, lacking faster than light mobility, have perfected the art of extraction and synthesis from whatever they can reach. That, more than anything else, made me realize why we cannot hand them FTTL. Not yet. A species that thrives in scarcity will devour the stars in abundance. Then came the accident. One of their ore haulers, an autonomous probe towing a fully loaded chunk of asteroid, collided with our vessel. The impact was minor for us. Our shielding systems held, but the probe was obliterated. Its trajectory was disrupted. But the true horror dawned as we examined the data. The asteroid it had been dragging, now spinning freely, was no longer on course for Earth orbit. It was falling toward the planet. Direct trajectory. The size of it, the mass. If it struck, the damage would be catastrophic. Entire cities, continents even, could be vaporized. We had triggered an extinction event. I have never known such fear. In frantic collaboration, we examined the guidance logs. The probe had been correctly programmed. Its timing was tight, yes, but not fatally so. The only anomaly was us. We had inserted our cruiser into a segment of Earth's orbital path that had been clearly flagged by the humans as high traffic. They had even shared the schedules with us to avoid this very scenario. The fault was ours. The discussions that followed were grim. Our diplomatic and command teams were divided. Half urged immediate departure. Others proposed indirect solutions, perhaps deploying drones or sending a remote warning. But the ambassador and I were united in our stance. We caused this. We would fix it, even if it killed us. We began preparations to use our ship as a kinetic barrier. We would intercept the asteroid with our forward shields at maximum capacity, recharged to the limit of their endurance. Impact would almost certainly destroy us, but it would stop the rock from reaching Earth. And then the strangest thing happened. As we maneuvered into the asteroid's path, bracing for annihilation, the humans called us. They begged us to stand down. Calder himself contacted me, his voice filled with panic. "Get out of the way," he said. "It's not your burden to carry." I was stunned. "We're responsible," I told him. "We must." But he was insistent. "No, please, move." I was angry, confused. Did they not understand the consequences? Did they not grasp what was coming? Then, I saw it. A flash, blinding, controlled. In the vastness of space, a light bloomed just beyond the asteroid, a nuclear detonation, not meant to destroy, meant to redirect. Before I could process what I was seeing, a wave of drones, dozens, maybe hundreds, screamed past our viewports, slamming into the asteroid's surface. Tiny engines fired, tethers wrapped around its irregular form. A coordinated ballet of thrust and inertia began. They weren't stopping it. They were guiding it. In less than 20 minutes, the once doomed rock had been nudged into a stable orbit, far from Earth's surface. Not a single life lost. When the aftermath settled, Calder explained, they had contingency plans, fail-safes. The asteroid, redirection weapons, small nukes, precision thrusters, adaptive drones had been in place since the very start of their mining program. From the beginning, they had known that such accidents were possible. They prepared for the worst, quietly, relentlessly. Why take such risks? I asked him. His answer? Because we had to. Necessity isn't just the mother of invention, it's the father of survival. 50 planetary rotations have passed since the asteroid incident. On the surface, life in the human system has returned to a semblance of normalcy. Civilian broadcasts have resumed their usual chatter, music, entertainment, political bickering, and endless speculation. But beneath that familiar chaos, something has changed. The tension in the air is different now, quieter, heavier. Their people are divided. Many citizens were outraged, not at us, not directly, but at their own representatives, their diplomats. Accusations flew. Was it a cover-up? A near miss they weren't told about? Shouldn't someone be punished? Others took a different stance, one of defiance. They claimed it was weakness to even consider accepting our help. A vocal faction has emerged, demanding we be held accountable for what almost happened. Aliens endangered Earth, their messages scream. Some have called for war, and Calder has changed. Gone is the open-handed curiosity that defined his early negotiations. He still meets with us formally, with restraint, but something in him has tightened, withdrawn. I see the toll it's taken in his posture, his eyes, the weight of his voice. His focus has narrowed. No longer does he ask about our cultures, our agricultural techniques, our ancient myths. Now, all his questions revolve around one subject: justice. He wants to know how our civilizations define criminality, not just in terms of laws but in terms of mercy. What happens, he asks, when someone commits a terrible crime but also performs an act of selflessness? Do we punish them fully? Do we weigh their actions equally? Do we forgive? He's asked these questions a dozen different ways in the past few weeks. It's no longer diplomacy, it's personal. One of our aides, curious, asked Calder why this topic obsessed him. He gave a half smile, shook his head, and muttered something about human values being built on contradictions. Then he said nothing else for the rest of the session. It wasn't until much later that I began to understand, because something far more disturbing had been happening behind the scenes. Our ship's crew, not the diplomats, but the engineers, the technicians, the scientists, had been monitoring the transmissions directed at our vessel. Not official broadcasts, not public messages, but private signals, individual communications. Some were simple welcomes, inquiries, questions from children, even music. But many others, they were dark, violent. Some messages contained nothing but raw hatred, accusations, threats, outrage, religious damnation, calls for extermination. There were death threats not just toward us, but toward Calder and his team. One message included coordinates of a human diplomat's home and promised a reckoning. At first, I thought it must be a rogue fringe. Every species has them. But there were so many, thousands, tens of thousands, and now I understood why Calder had been so insistent, begging, even that we never open or translate messages unless they bore his personal signature. He was protecting us. Today, we confronted him. Calder came to our ship alone. No aides, no formality, just him, the ambassador, our captain, and myself. We did not speak immediately. Instead, we laid the printed transcripts on the table between us, a grim pile of rage and fear. He picked them up, skimmed the first few pages, then paused. Color drained from his face. His hands trembled. His aide, who had accompanied him but remained silent, looked at the pile, turned away, and did not speak again. Our ambassador, careful and calm, asked him the question that hung between us all. What do you have to say on behalf of these people? There was a long silence. Then, Calder spoke. I wish they didn't exist. We were stunned. The people? I asked. He nodded slowly. Yes, the people. The ones who sent these. The ones so afraid of the unknown that they choose to hate it before understanding it. He looked defeated, broken. The ambassador pressed further. These people threaten my crew, my diplomats. Should we tolerate this? Calder didn't answer right away. Finally, he spoke again softly but with conviction. You must understand. Humans are tribal by nature, suspicious by instinct. We didn't evolve as apex predators. We evolved as prey scavengers, hunters, survivors. We mistrust what we don't recognize. That's why you were allowed on Earth only after the asteroid. You prove something we understand: willingness to sacrifice. But if that's true, I said, why didn't the hate stop after that sacrifice? He didn't flinch. Because humans don't think with one mind. We are not one opinion. We are billions. And disagreement is our default state. He looked at us, weary but firm. Why do you think we still have the United Nations? He asked. Because we need an arena for conflict and organized space to argue and maybe to agree. The more humans there are in a room, the more likely they'll fight over how to fill it. Then, with bitter clarity, he said something I will never forget. Suppress them? No, every human of importance agrees on this. Everyone has a right to be wrong, even when the wrong is terrifying. Especially then. It was not a defense. It was an acknowledgement. I began to realize the truth that had eluded me for so long. Humans don't just coexist with contradiction, they depend on it, nearly. A full Earth cycle has passed since first contact, 11 lunar cycles, 360 planetary rotations. And still, we orbit among them, and something remarkable has occurred. The humans have stopped asking for our faster-than-light technology. What began as relentless petitions, countless proposals, subtle trades, and increasingly desperate bartering, has now given way to a different kind of dialogue, one not focused on what they can take, but on what they can learn. Calder, to his credit, was the one who first suggested it, rather than negotiate through layers of intermediaries, ambassadors, and formal councils. He proposed something new: direct communication, a live address, a transmission to every human, across every colony, every outpost, every settlement from Mercury's shadowed bunkers to the icy research domes orbiting Neptune's moons. At first, I thought it a trap, or perhaps a test, but Calder explained it with a clarity that, in hindsight, only someone raised in a democracy of dissent could understand. If you want humanity to listen, he said, don't assume they already know what's going on. Break it down, lay it bare, assume ignorance, not stupidity, and explain. So we did. We crafted a message clear, structured, and sincere. We told them who we were, a confederacy of species bound together by more than survival, more than territory, by purpose, by the shared recognition that something else lurked beyond this galaxy's edge, something vast, something hungry. We told them that FTTL wasn't withheld out of cruelty, but out of caution, that its gift, given too early, had shattered entire civilizations. And then, we listened. The humans were permitted to respond, not their leaders, not filtered officials, the people. Their questions came by the thousands. What do your cities look like? Why did you choose now? Do your people mourn the dead the same way we do? Have you ever made war on one another? Why do you think we aren't ready? Do you ever fear us? The breadth of their curiosity was staggering, from the mundane to the philosophical to the deeply uncomfortable. And still, Calder watched each reply roll in with a solemn calm, as though he had expected it all. It was his final act of brilliance, because soon after, his body began to fail. It started subtly. Shortness of breath, missed sessions. Fatigue, he claimed, was just exhaustion, but we saw through the veil. Medical scans confirmed it. Systemic organ failure, progressive, irreversible. Our healers and biotechnicians offered assistance, nothing invasive, just aid. But Calder refused. His aides, tight-lipped and grim, confirmed the truth. He had been poisoned, a slow toxin, trace metals, absorbed over time, likely slipped into his drink during one of his tours at the Uncomplex. His team had narrowed it down to a 3-day window, but not the perpetrator. I was furious. Furious at the humans. Furious at the timing. Furious that I didn't see it sooner. And then something happened that I still don't fully understand. He contacted me, not our ambassador, not our captain, me. His voice was weak, raspy. You've got to tell them, he whispered. Tell your leaders, quietly. Don't make it public. Why? I asked, and then he said it. Because I want to see what you'll do. And the line went dead. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying the moment in my mind. Not just the poisoning, the betrayal, but his reaction to it. He knew. He had known for weeks. And still, he pressed forward. Still, he kept the channels open. Still, he gave us the final choice, that kind of trust. I didn't think humans were capable of it, but the next day, he proved it once more. In a live, global broadcast that interrupted every human communication. Feed from satellites to civilian networks, Calder Anson spoke directly to his species. He looked skeletal, gaunt, fragile, but his voice was clear. I don't have much time left, he said, and I don't have all the answers, but I know. This one of you poisoned me, one of my own, a diplomat I trusted. He paused, letting the weight of his words settle. But I also know this. I told the aliens. And I told them I know it wasn't them. That's not a guess. That's a decision. Because if we ever want to be seen as more than what we've been, we have to trust, even when it's terrifying. Then he did something none of us expected. He invited us, our ambassador, our captain, and me into the broadcast. 3 aliens, visible, live, before 10 billion humans. I nearly panicked. We weren't prepared, but the transmission was already rolling. Calder looked into the lens, pain but unwavering. So now it's your turn, he said. If you believe we're worthy, then show us. Not with words, not with handshakes, but with action. He gave a pained smile. You hold the asteroid. You hold our future. You decide. And the screen went dark. We sat in silence, 3 of us, alone on the bridge. An entire world staring up at us through the lens of a dozen satellites, 100,000 antennas, a billion listening minds. Calder's final words echoed in the stillness like a heartbeat. You hold the asteroid. You hold our future. You decide. And, in that moment, it was true. Every communication channel on the planet, every frequency, stream, and interplanetary relay was watching. The choice belonged to us, to decide the fate of a civilization that had shown us both compassion and chaos, brilliance and barbarity. I could see the pale blue world below, its oceans and continents, its lights pulsing like fireflies across the darkened hemisphere. And I imagined them, billions of humans watching, waiting, afraid. We had the means. The asteroid from the earlier incident was still in a controlled orbit. We could have let it fall. We could have ended it all with a keystroke. One calculated silence. One single inaction. It would have crushed cities, ended nations, erased the guilty along with the innocent. The ambassador stood slowly, his voice low, uncertain. Their leader is dead, killed by one of their own, a trusted delegate. A betrayal from within. He turned to me, and I saw in his eyes what he wouldn't say aloud. This reflects poorly. This species, he said, has twice collected weapons that could end all life on their world. Twice. They still war among themselves, still divide into tribes, still tolerate ignorance, faith-driven violence, and greed. He looked down at Earth, and yet, he hesitated. Then he turned again, his voice now stronger. And yet the very man who was betrayed entrusted them to us. With his last breath, he gave us the power to judge. He stepped closer to the live feed, the weight of history in his words. He said we could show trust by letting them live. He said their future must be earned, not given. His expression softened. I've read their history, their science, their stories. I've seen the damage they've done, but I've also seen their capacity to heal. I've watched a species crawl from the mud to the stars in the blink of a galactic eye, and I have seen them choose mercy. He faced the screen. So now, we choose it too. Then he said the words that would echo for centuries. Our greeting lasted 1 year, humanity. Now let us welcome you to the stars. And with that, the screen faded. Earth wept. The response was immediate. In the minutes following the broadcast, we received millions of signals, some joyous, some confused, many simply grateful. Across every continent, humans spilled into streets and rooftops, watching the night sky. They sang, they cried, some knelt in silence, some lit lanterns, others simply whispered thank you. Later that night, we received word Calder had died. He passed quietly, surrounded by his aides. According to one, his final words were simple. Did they choose? When they nodded, he smiled, and then he was gone. The next days were a blur. A new ambassador was named Alara Kincaid, a seasoned negotiator from one of their Martian settlements. She was young, sharp, and emotionally guarded, but when we met her, she seemed softened, as though Calder's shadow still lingered beside her, guiding her steps. The United Nations underwent rapid reform. Their tangled bureaucracy began untangling itself. The old rivalries, still alive, were temporarily muted by the gravity of the moment. They were now part of something greater, not dominant, not superior, equal. Representatives from 28 other spacefaring civilizations arrived over the following weeks, each offering their own welcomes. Most were hesitant, some were wary, a few were openly disapproving. They had seen the broadcast too. They had heard Calder's challenge, and many of them did not agree with our decision, but they accepted it, because diplomacy, like trust, sometimes begins with a leap.as for the traitor Calders. Killer he was found, caught attempting to flee Earth aboard a private shuttle hidden in the rings of Saturn. He confessed under questioning, his motives drenched in ideology and bitterness. He claimed Calder had betrayed humanity by kneeling to aliens. He was sentenced under human law, not ours. But we were permitted to witness the trial. He never once showed remorse. Calder's body was cremated in orbit. His ashes were scattered in a slow ring above the Earth, a new constellation born of fire and legacy. The orbital station, once a simple construction hub, was renamed in his honor. The Anson Ring. The galaxy did not erupt in applause, despite our decision, despite Calder's plea, and despite humanity's astonishing adaptability. The truth remains, many of the Confederacy's member species were deeply unsettled by the outcome, and who could blame them? To witness a species who had only just reached its own moons be handed the keys to galactic dialogue after poisoning their own representative, no less felt reckless to some, dangerous to others. The diplomatic murmurs across the stars were cold, clinical, even hostile, but none dared challenge the ruling. We, the first to make contact, had made our choice. And the Confederacy, for all its complex politics and philosophical debate, honors the sanctity of first contact. Still, the humans didn't help their case in the days that followed. Their media always excitable broadcast interviews, debates, documentaries. The asteroid broadcast was replayed endlessly, often edited to emphasize drama over diplomacy. There were protests on Earth, and on Mars, and on Titan. Some groups hailed Calder as a martyr. Others called him a fool. Still others demanded the asteroid be brought back to remind the galaxy who's in charge. But amid the chaos, real progress began. The United Nations streamlined its operations, discarding centuries-old procedures that had long stifled unity. A new branch of human governance emerged, dedicated solely to galactic relations, the Council of Earth and Beyond, with Kincaid at its head, and in orbit above Earth. We broke ground figuratively on a shared project, a neutral zone, a diplomatic platform co-built by human engineers and alien architects, suspended between Earth and Luna, crafted from a new alloy of human-forged titanium and one of our own crystalline composites. It would serve as a permanent seat of human presence in galactic affairs and a safe harbor for ambassadors from all worlds, a monument, but also a test. We named it the Threshold. Even in its skeletal stage, it shimmered with the promise of what might be a place where old suspicions might dissolve, where new alliances might be forged, where perhaps the galaxy could look past Earth's blood-soaked legacy and see something brighter. Still, there were growing pains. More than a few of our own delegation voiced their frustration. Some argued that we had placed too much responsibility on a single species not yet prepared to lead. Others worried that our own neutrality had been compromised, that we had invested too much in Calder, in emotion, in the narrative of redemption. But I knew better, because I had sat across from that man. I had watched him weaken, day by day, yet never break. I had seen him choose trust when every instinct screamed betrayal. I had heard his voice tremble, not in fear but in hope, and I had listened. There is a saying in one of Earth's oldest languages, Latin, I believe, fiat lux, let there be light, and in humanity, I see that light, faint, flickering, struggling against a vast darkness of old instincts, ancient fears, and inherited divisions, but still burning, against all odds, still burning. Now, with this final entry, I close this chapter of our journey. A new ambassador walks Earth's halls. A new station grows between its stars. And though much remains uncertain, one thing is clear. We did not find gods or monsters. We found people, flawed, brilliant, terrifying, beautiful, and they are ours now, our allies, our charges, our mirrors. We welcome them to the galaxy. Let us hope the galaxy proves worthy of them too.